is acting funny, always be mindful with your vehicles, especially if it's in your third or fourth house and it's acting funny. So be mindful, is all I'm saying. Anyways, all right. Well, let's see. It's 8:07. I don't have any messages for anybody. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we're gonna get this baby started. I'm so excited. I just love the muses. Um, hear me so much. All right. So tonight, if I can get it code, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see this and hear me. If you can't, let me know. We are talking about, and listen, when I'm pronouncing Greek words, sometimes I get tongue-tied, but I think I have this pretty decent. It's Melpomene. Melpomene is the Greek muse of tragedy. And, you know, next to Urania, I don't try to play favorites, but definitely she's, you know, top two. I also wanted to just briefly touch on tonight what Hellenism is, you know, polytheism and paganism through a Hellenic lens, because, you know, here I am, you guys. I always put the cart in front of the horse, right? And this type, I'm an omnis practitioner. You guys are pretty omnistic. So this is kind of folds into omnism, but it is kind of an independent practice too. And so, like, if anybody ever said to you, well, what are you doing work with the muses for? Well, it's Hellenic work. And so I just wanted you to know what that was if you ever had to explain it. So I always, you know, skip sometimes the important explanation. Sorry about that. All right, so Melpomene. Let me just move my little bracket here. All right, there we go. All right, so Melpomene was the muse of tragedy. As you know, the muses were very correlated to poets and poetry. And when a poet especially would die, you know, she would be there singing their songs of mourning. And so that's probably what she is most well known for, is singing at these poets' funerals. So she is associated with a lot of different types of spells and magic. And I'm going to be teaching some of that to you tonight. Very basic stuff, very easy, nothing complicated. And her domain obviously is over tragedy, and that includes performance. So like Madison, you know, Madison is in My Daughter. She's part of Grave Intention. Some of you may have worked with her. I mean, she has her own clients through here, but I don't know if she's ever worked with any of you. I think you guys are all mine. But she does performance theater, and so Melpomene is, you know, somebody she's pretty attached to. Anybody who's into performance theater will work with her. But she also can induce sadness and despair, like, and we use that in spell work through songs, through dramatic performance, through manipulating emotions and creating illusions, basically. And so again, I'm going to teach you some of that tonight. So her connection to tragedy allows her to influence the emotions of others, especially when we're looking at emotions like sadness, pain, and despair. There is that creation of illusion there. Sometimes in some of the spells I'll share with you tonight, if you are trying to maybe get somebody to think about the worst case scenario. Maybe you're trying to humble somebody, teach them a little humility. You know, Melpomene is one that would help you with that, you know, kind of trapping them in that state of misery in their mind. Not that I'm teaching you, you know, bad stuff tonight. There is no good or bad. These are just options in terms of manipulating energy. She uses her voice, her singing, of course, that can be very manipulative energetically. All the frequency changes there. There are stories about her driving people to madness through her song. So yeah, so I mean, she's a very, very interesting muse. She's a little bit, I don't ever want to use the word on the dark side, but whereas her sisters are very uplifting, Melpomene, she's kind of that shadow aspect of humanity. So other quick facts about Melpomene. So a famous satirist, Pasquin, many people have heard of that name, used to refer to Melpomene as murder loving. Well, again, that's because of the shadow aspect attachments and the despair and the pain that she could elicit in people. There's also a planet named after her. It's called, there's a little chart here, 18 Melpomene. So this was named after her by a famous British astronomer in 1852. And he named this after her to represent the tragedy he experienced. He had lost his daughter, and he had also lost a son 13 years earlier on the exact same day. So wild. And it was so wild and sad that he decided to name, the discovery of this minor planet after her. So just kind of a fun fact there. All right. So one of the things you'll know about Melpomene is she is known to be the I wish I knew how here. Hang on. Oh, there we go. I figured it out. All right. So she is known to be the mother of sirens, mermaids. She has an attachment to them, especially in art. If you look at like Renaissance period art, you'll see Melpomene usually on a ship, and there's sirens, there's, mermaid activity going on. So that is just one association to her. One of the other muses, we haven't covered her yet individually. Her name is Thalia. She is her counterpoint. She's the muse of comedy, and she's also usually depicted in these images of mermaids and sirens, basically attacking men on their boats and like killing them. So, I mean, again, Renaissance period. So she has a lot of that in art. So if you ever like researched her in art, you would see a lot of that. The sirens were called bird women. They would sing those hauntingly beautiful songs. They would do that to lure these men to their deaths, which is again why she has a connection to Melpomene and some of the other Greek gods and goddesses. Of course, we look at mermaids and sirens in today's pop culture as these beautiful creatures. Back then, not so much. They had the bodies were kind of bird-like, and they weren't really attractive. They were more horrifying than anything else. So that's just kind of a difference in culture that we've experienced. But in the narratives from the original narratives, they were from the Greek underworld, and that's where they returned. And Melpomene, of course, was very connected to the underworld. So the original sirens were infernal counterparts, excuse me, to the muses. So I don't know if any of you study infernal magic or infernal deities, but they're kind of the counterparts to the light counterparts to dark. So there is that aspect. Again, same thing with Melpomene. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because if you research her, if you Google her, you're going to hear about all these siren stories that she's associated with. All right, a blessing. I wanted to share this with you guys. You can take a picture. I can email this to you. This is a common blessing if you're going to be working with Melpomene. I'm not going to read it out loud. You guys know I don't like doing that unless we're actually going to be doing some sort of work. But this is something historically that can be found like in the historical texts as far as what people would sing or speak to solicit her. A lot of times this was an offering. People that were soliciting the muses a lot of times were poor and they didn't have jewels and things to offer. So they would offer their voice. So they would sing with their voice. They would sing these songs or write poems as offerings to solicit their help, which is nice for us too. It doesn't cost a lot of money to work with them. Some deities, that's not the case. All right, so shadow and trauma work. The other thing I wanted to cover, of course, with her is as the muse of tragedy, her energy aims to remind us about the vital role our tragic experiences play in our growth, as well as how to adopt healthy forms of expressing and dealing with our troubles and burdens. So she offers her, I hate to use the word worshipers, but followers, sort of unique and creative responses to deal with failures and loss. So this is just kind of like the shadow self diagram here. Most everybody's familiar with, Jung. So she is attached to shadow and trauma work, epigenetics. Working with her helps to maybe sort through some of the muddied waters there. We all have trauma. Everybody has experienced something unpleasant in life at some point. And working with Melpomene can help to heal, repair, and restore some of that so that our shadow energy is managed. And so it doesn't become uncontrollable, which oftentimes will happen, right before we bottom out and we start looking for help. So it is very unique because she is the only muse that really is attached to shadow work this way, working through trauma, healing through trauma. So I definitely wanted to mention that. I wanted to give you this recipe also. Again, I can email this to you or take a picture, whatever you're recording this. This is a very well-known blessing oil for Melpomene. So this originally was used for people to improve their voice, whether it was singing or if they were going to be giving a public speech or talking to a large crowd. Now it's kind of grown to be not just using the voice box speech, but I think also for just communications in general. So this is used for all aspects of communicating speech, verbalization, vocalization. It is supposed to be used daily for about 12 days. And really, you know, in the old books, it says you should rest your voice as much as possible. That's not really necessary unless you're doing this and you're performing a concert or something, which most of us aren't. So I don't think you need to worry about resting your voice, but it is supposed to be ingested in small sips over, you know, several minutes. And I also want to point out, you know, nobody who's diabetic or pregnant should drink this because there is ground licorice root and that's not good. So this very, very simple, you know, it's just a cup, some egg yolk, honey, warm water, lemon juice, ground licorice root, and an orange candle. The directions are very easy here. You're going to make your little enchanted tea and you're going to drink it next to your candlelight. So I do recommend doing that blessing right before, during, and right after drinking this tea because that helps to connect the energetic bridge for her to come in and assist. All right. Mirror magic. This is something else that's very connected to Melpomene. So this is an ancient practice, you know, used for self-discovery and empowerment, but it's also kind of that gateway to understanding our inner selves, right? So for a lot of beginners who are kind of stepping into the realm of magic or spirituality, mirror spells sometimes is that bridge because it helps somebody connect with their essence and kind of claim their space in the world. So navigating relationships with mirrors can be complex. And the reason for that is nowadays, mirrors have become, you know, not just that reflective surface, but kind of like that harsh judge. So when we look in the mirror, what are we looking at? We're seeing all the things that make us insecure, that make us doubt ourselves, that make us feel less than. So that has happened over the last, you know, 50 plus years. It's gotten really bad. You know, society standards of beauty and perfection distort people's perceptions. And so that leads to a distorted relationship with our own reflection. So by working with mirrors, not only are you reclaiming the space of the mirror through the magical practice, you're reclaiming your power and your agency over that. So it is about personal empowerment. Mirror magic offers us the opportunity to kind of rewrite the narrative, transforming the mirror from a symbol of criticism into a tool of empowerment. So I like mirror magic. I think that it's great for keeping us humble, authentic, and keeping us in a high vibrational self-love state. So I'm going to share with you some very simple ways that you can use mirrors. So you can use mirrors for scrying. Of course, a lot of people are familiar with that form of divination. It can be done many, many different ways. But basically, if you're starting out, people divine in different ways. People use, like I said, water, fire, glass, dark stones, but there's something kind of similar there, except with fire. There is that reflection. So with mirrors, you actually have an enhanced perfect or reflection or enhanced view. And what people will do is look for messages, symbols, or visions. So you can just use a black backed mirror. You can make one yourself and just practice meditating with it. If it's something that calls to you or that's aligned with you, you will experience messages, symbols, or visions. It may take you a hot minute, but give it a try if it's something that's interesting to you. Beauty magic. Mirrors are known for glamour magic. I think a couple years ago, I had a bunch of lipstick spells I posted on one of the sites. I don't remember which one. And this one uses a mirror with your favorite lipstick and just basically a bowl of rose petals. So you got to remember, manifesting spell work, 9/10 of it is focus and desire, right? And it's pushing that energy out into the world to allow it to produce. So this one, you just stand in front of a mirror, or you can use a handheld mirror. You're going to put your lipstick in the bowl of rose petals. You're going to now I did give you a phrase here to repeat. You don't have to use this specific phrase. You can write out your own phrase. I actually encourage that. This is just a very basic, kind of rhyming frequency, chanting, good words that went together, but feel free to choose and say whatever feels right for you. So you're going to do your chant, apply your lipstick, blow yourself a kiss in the mirror, right? Because you're awesome. And then just keep that lipstick handy all day for touch-ups, to really feel empowered, to really boost your glamour aspects. And then at night, just keep that lipstick in that bowl of rose petals, to keep it charged. Self-love again. This is a good one around Valentine's Day. It's very simple. It's using remember, those candy hearts. I haven't had them in years, but I know they're very famous. They have the little words on them. One year, I actually found some that had like not nice words on them. I loved those. Those were hilarious. But get the ones with the nice words on them. Pick them out at random. Looking into a mirror, you can read the messages to yourself out loud and then consume it. I know it sounds simple, but this is simple practices that boost our confidence levels and boost our power as being our own authentic versions of ourselves. So even though they're simple and they sound silly, doing things like this really ramp up your energy. And so you can do this every single day for 9 days, and just think about how fantastic you are when you're doing it. It's like consumption magic a little bit. You're not compounding anything, but you are consuming something while setting an intention. Repelling negativity. Mirrors are, well known for that. So basically you just want a single mirror. You can consecrate the mirror if you want with any of your, tools. I know some of you guys use tools, or you can just stand that mirror up in a bowl of black salt. Black salt's good for protection and repelling negativity. In the bowl facing the mirror, you can place something that represents your target, a person who's causing you problems. So maybe their photo, their name paper, a business card, if you've made a pop-it, maybe it's a personal effect. And you put that right in front of the mirror in that bowl. So this is going to reflect that individual's negative energy back onto them. You can create what's called a mirror box. It's the same principle as a single mirror, but you line the inside of the box with several mirrors. You can just hot glue them into place. And then of course you want to put a magical link to the person that mirror box has been created for. So again, personal effects, photos, whatever, and then seal that box. You can use black salt if you want to add a little bit more oomph to it, but this is a good way to keep somebody trapped. If the same person keeps projecting nastiness at you, put them in a mirror box. It's a good way to keep them locked up, kind of bound up so they're not able to project. So one of the other things with the mirror box, I will tell you, a fun thing here, you can smash a mirror, with a hammer while chanting that person's name or thinking about them, fixating on them. It is fun. It feels good. It's therapeutic. You don't want to hurt yourselves. But then go ahead and use those shards to make your mirror box. It's going to be a bit more potent doing it that way. All right. So, whoops. Any questions? No? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose anybody. So let me go back. Whoops. I hit the wrong button. Hang on, you guys. Oh my goodness. All right. There we go. All right. Everybody see me? Okay, great. All right. Practices for mediumship with the muses. So mediumship, all of the muses can be used in mediumship. When we're talking about the muse of tragedy, I don't know if I would necessarily invoke her for love or relationship matters, but I mean, you can try it if you want. I never have. I just don't think it would work well with her. Anyways, setting up an altar, if you're going to be doing mediumship using the muses, you know, create a dedicated space for that. Have symbolic items representing those muses on that altar. Have offerings and prayers. So like with Melpomene, that blessing I gave you, use that blessing, sing it. That's an offering. You can also leave things like honey, wine, or anything really, you know, to dedicate. Actually, I'll tell you what I think is a great creative work to dedicate as an offering is art. Like by my muse altar, all the paintings I make, I put up there, I dedicate them to the muses. So, I mean, any kind of art, drawings, you know, paintings, you can dedicate those as offerings. They're very powerful. Um, Meditation and ritual, you know, engaging in practices to quiet the mind and connect with the muses on a deeper level is important. So it takes practice. You know, don't expect like your first time walking into a meditation where you're expecting mediumship to produce. You need to, you know, kind of have a schedule, do it regularly, consistently. Praying to the muses individually based on the desired creative inspiration. Yes, yes, and yes. If I am dealing with something traumatic, something shadow energy based, Melpomene is going to be my go-to. If I am doing an astrological report, you need clarity, Urania, the one I'm going to go to. So choose the muse that fits what you're doing or what you're working on, especially in mediumship if you're looking for clarity, insight, and foresight. Journaling and reflection. If you're not good at meditating, if you're not good, you know, some people have a hard time, you know, clearing their mind. Try journaling. That's the same thing. It's a different type of meditation, right? Try inner purging journaling. That can turn into a mediumship session through automatic writing. So also documenting your experiences and insights gained every time you do meditate or work with the muses. That's a good way to track manifestation. Are the bonds getting stronger? Do they need work? It's a good way to kind of gauge that as well. You know, honoring them through art, we talked about that. Melpomene is associated also with pendulum divination. So I rarely use a pendulum, once in a great while. But if you are a pendulum person, she definitely is a great muse to kind of solicit to assist with that. Always be open to receive inspiration in unexpected forms. Sometimes we have expectations of what we're going to receive, how we're going to receive it. And if you do that, you kind of limit yourself in terms of not being open enough to receive everything that's coming to you from all directions. So always be very open. And just recognize that the muses are not limited to specific artistic fields, so they can inspire in diverse ways. So the relationship here with the muses is a journey of cultivation and trust. And if you stay on that journey, you will develop mediumship abilities by working with them. It's just kind of like one of their like things. So now I want to talk about water divination. There's so many different forms of it, right? So a lot of people reference water divination to dowsing, water witching, hydromancy. You'll see people using those forked sticks or special like copper pendulums or those rods. And usually that is leading to like underground water sources, minerals, hidden objects. So that definitely holds some space. You know, dowsers been around for forever, ever since the muses, really. With practitioners, they may use these dowsers to kind of observe different changes, especially with water in a container, like the color, the ripples, the changes of the water, if they're divinating with water. Some think that, you know, depending on what you're using, like copper, that can be sensitive to electromagnetic fields or subtle vibrations emitted by a target substance. So that may be one way that it works well. You know, psychic abilities, obviously, the stronger your connection to the earth, the more you're allowed kind of access through dowsing to locate hidden resources. One of these common water rituals from back in the heyday was just having a glass of water, a bay leaf, and, you know, the user's own aura, and they would divinate with that depending on how that leaf would move in the water, like which direction it would move when they would ask a question. But I'm going to give you a couple of different water divination methods. So the first one here is hydromancy. So the flow water speaks to the intensity of current or upcoming events and circumstances. So For this one, you would dip a metal ring in water and gauge the movements like a pendulum. So is it moving up and down, back and forth, or interpret the answer from the number of ripples that arise? That's one form. Now, of course, if you're going to do hydromancy, you better have a chart, and it should be unique. Don't copy anything off the internet. Like, what is a up tide bounce or a low tide bounce with that pendulum mean to you? Chart that, and then those are the answers to your interpretive questions. So that's going to be important if you do hydromancy. Okay, some of these are funny to pronounce, so bear with me, you guys. Divination with water, including acorns and oak trees, is called quersumancy. So this was where two lovers could drop an acorn into a glass of water, and if those acorns touch, they are meant to be together. So, according to the myth, oak trees would shed their leaves when an oath was broken, also. So, this was a form of water divination, dropping an acorn with your lover to see if the acorns would touch, and either you were meant to be or not. If you were near the tree when you did this and it shed its leaves, that means like one of them was a cheater. Okay, occultomancy. So, this is where 21 needles are placed in a shallow dish and water is slowly added, causing the needles to move and create patterns that are then interpreted. So again, if this was something that you wanted to try with water divination, make yourself a chart and write down the different patterns and what those patterns mean to you so you have a consistent, reliable way to read. Because if you do solicit a muse to assist you in this area, if you solicit Melpomene to help you with water divination, if you don't have a guide or a chart, there's not much she can do because, it's just going to be a guessing game. So always do that beforehand. All right, next fun one. Lacanomancy. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, you guys, but this is where you would pour a small amount of oil into a dish of water and then interpret the shapes and forms that come through. This is very similar to an old German divination method where you would melt up a piece of lead in a spoon and then pour the melted lead in the water, and that lead would solidify, would form a shape, and you would read the shape. So very similar to that. I think oil's a lot easier to get a hold of than, lead. It sounds easier. I've never tried this, but definitely it sounds easier than lead. Ceroscopy, very similar to ceromancy. So in ceromancy, when we do a rook cast, we will read the wax drippings, like the shapes that are formed in the wax afterwards. Sometimes if you guys see I add glitter, people are always like, why do you add glitter? Well, glitter is good for shielding, but glitter is also good for helping me read the ceromancy. So at the end of a burn, if I thought something was off, I can look at the wax shapes. The glitter will travel that wet wax line and it sticks out to me better so I can see whatever was created in the bowl that needs to pop for me. So with ceroscopy, a candle is lit and then the wax is poured or dripped into the water. And then again, patterns and designs are interpreted. So you would have that chart that you would be relying on. This is actually, I like ceroscopy. It's exactly like ceromancy, but we're not using water. I like the idea though, because if you were to pour hot wax into water, just like lead, it's going to immediately distort itself into a shape and harden. And that's really great for divination because you're working with then a very definable shape and it's not guesswork. I like that. I don't like guesswork. All right. So any questions or are we good? I know I go fast. I don't want to go too fast, but all right. So funerary rites, because she is the muse of tragedy and she is associated with funerals, there is a heavy association with Melpomene to funerary rites. Now, in Greece, ancient traditions were very complex, very similar to the Egyptians. So things have obviously changed in Greece and everywhere since then, but there were certain ancient Greek funerary practices I wanted to explain. And again, I'm doing my best to pronounce these words, you guys. Prothesis, the body was washed, anointed, dressed, and laid out on a bed for viewing by the mourners. Then there was ekphora, the funeral procession to the burial site, which usually had musicians and mourners, and this is where you would also find Melpomene singing. Deposition, the body was either buried or cremated, and then Perdonan, I don't know, a funeral feast held at the family's home after the burial, which is a lot like a red meal or the housel. So, I mean, very similar, different word. So there was commemorative rites. So women played a significant role. They would visit the graveside, they would leave offerings, they would perform rituals, and they would do this on very specific days. So they would do that on the 40-day marker. That's why we talk about in our spirit comms group, when we used to have spirit comms, we would always wait 40 days after somebody passed, because they need that 40 days to navigate the liminal space before you start harassing them, right? Like, come talk to me. And then it would be done the third month, 6th month, 9th month, and at the year anniversary. So those are very important days in ancient Greek practice for going to the gravesite, doing offerings, performing rituals. And Melpomene was often, solicited at these time frames too, to come and sing her songs or leave her mark on the deceased. So the washing and anointing, of course, that's symbolic cleansing of the body with water and perfumed oils. Libations are liquid offerings. So a lot of times these offerings were wine, coffee, things that were liquid and absorbable by the ground, the soil, the earth. Lamentation, the expression of grief. So for Melpomene, of course, it was song. It was expressing grief through song to heal. But us humans, our expression, especially in ancient Greece, was the ripping and tearing of hair was very common. I know that sounds crazy, but they would actually rip hair out, and then they would make charms with that hair, or they would leave that hair at the grave sites. And then, of course, remembrance, honoring the deceased through ritual at the site. So Melpomene was very involved in all of this. I kind of broke it down a little bit more here, and I won't, go too deeply into this, but oftentimes the body, after it was cleansed, was laid on oregano. So oregano in ancient Greece was a mystical herb, and so they would also put vine branches under the body. So you would have vine branches and oregano under the body. Now, this was a very kind of strong smelling herb, back then. I think it still is kind of strong, but I think part of it was to repel animals, so animals weren't coming and messing with the body. But later on in European folklore, we find out that it was to avert ghosts and demons. Again, Melpomene was very connected to this. So there was that fear that even in death, evil forces of some kind were waiting to attack the departing soul or the body. And if it was attacked, it would be disastrous, right? Because the soul would be diverted. It could be diverted by a manipulative practitioner. It could be, prevented from reaching the haven of the underworld. And if the physical body was damaged, that would affect their postmortem functioning. So, like, if an animal attacked, say, your leg, and you woke up in the underworld, you would be missing a leg, and you would be pretty pissed because now you're a spirit forever with no leg, right? So they would take these precautions. So it was the duty of the survivors and, the muse like Melpomene to provide protection against these attacks until that body was safely in the ground and the soul had begun its journey to the underworld. Now, they would use amulets later on. We know for certain through archaeology that amulets were used to prevent attacks. And then the length too was, I think, shortened over the years. So like initially it was a very long process. The traditional length of prothesis was 1 day. This would fit in with the fact that on the 3rd day after death, the body was then carried to the place of burial. I know that they cut that down because obviously the longer a body is exposed, the more it decomposes, and animals are only going to be put off by oregano for so long. So it's very, like I said, I just wanted to give this information to you because I find it's very interesting. It is very connected to this muse. This muse kind of designed a lot of these processes and procedures. She was there for all of this. So it is part of her function, like if you're going to work with her. Other things, I kind of went on a legal tidbit here. You know, there was funerary legislation back then too. So late in the late archaic and classical periods, they started actually restricting the number of people who could participate in funerals, as well as the places that they could sing. So like in Athens, for example, they passed laws that only women over the age of 60 or that were closely related to the deceased could take part in these, you know, procedures. So over the years, they started kind of changing what was allowed, you know, trying to kind of curb, I guess, you know, how extreme it was, which kind of sucks because, you know, they were talking about like excessive funeral gifts, which are offerings, but I guess it was causing maybe an issue during that time. And so now in today's day and age, you see how short, quick, and dry a funeral is. You know, you're in and out in an hour, and they don't do any of this anymore. But if you work with Melpomene, she's all about the funerary rites, the customary ancient funeral rites. So I wanted to share that with you. Oh, look, I went on. My goodness, I really got into the funerary rites, didn't I? So like I said, there was a special supper. Many of you probably are familiar with a dumb supper. You know, dumb suppers, it's dining with the dead. This is very similar. So there was that dumb supper. They called it something different, where they would, you know, make a place for the recently deceased, to keep them happy so that they would leave happily. I talked more about offerings here, which could be jewelry, flowers, small objects from everyday life. There was the fear that if the deceased was pissed off, they would become a ghost and haunt them. So a lot of this was done to keep them from not being angry and just kind of moving on. Grave markers, you know, obviously, there was some weird laws back then, like funerary laws attempted to restrict the size and grandeur of markers because markers used to be, I mean, even now, like here in the States, you see these huge like markers, like you think who was buried there, a king. And that's how it was in ancient Greece. And then slowly over the years, they started minimizing that and making laws to prevent that. But that was a big thing. Hair was a symbolic human sacrifice offering. You would find that at funeral sites, or the grave sites. Um, what else is really important here? I don't want to like bore you guys to death. But again, you know, I kind of wrote down the number of days after the funeral. So the 3rd, 9th, 13th, and then at the year mark. These were all important days of making offerings also. Um, so yeah, it was very, very, I guess I went on a tangent here with funerary rites, but it was such an important part of ancient Greece and such an important part of this muse. Melpomene, this was a huge part of what she did and what she brought into the world and what she, you know, was kind of in charge of. All right, so switching gears, talking about the muses in general, I just wanted to give you guys kind of a brief background here because here's the thing. Like I said, I like to put the cart in front of the horse, and we're all very omnistic, but this is a Hellenic practice. So I wanted to explain to you what working with the muses is often referred to, just so that you had that kind of information. So this is Hellenism. It's referred to as Hellenismos, Hellenic polytheism, Hellenic paganism. In a nutshell, what we're doing with our Muse series, doing the monthly, and I'm going to be ramping these up. I'm doing the monthly group rituals, but I'm adding divination to them every month, and I'm adding more because it's getting, the bridge is getting stronger because I have, you know, all of you guys participating and I have more people participating. And so it's becoming a stronger bridge. So we're gonna access more of it. But basically, it's a modern revival of ancient Greek religion characterized by the worship of the gods and the deities of the Greek pantheon. So it encompasses a huge range of practice, and that can be strict reconstruction of ancient rituals to more eclectic approaches, which is what we do. It has more modern pagan elements to it. So in a nutshell, though, you know, this practice, we use historical and archaeological research, and we kind of adapt that information into our contemporary context, to be able to build these bridges to these Greek gods and goddesses. So in polytheism, There is no central church. There's no single set of doctrines. Each individual person is encouraged to study ancient sources and cultivate their own relationship with these deities through your own personal experiences. Now, we work together in a group, and that works well too. But there's no special guide or rule book that we have to follow. It is considered ritual worship because we are leaving offerings, which is central to Hellenic polytheism. We make these offerings in exchange for divine blessings. So keep that in mind. It is that basic deital solicitation aspect. This is an open religion. Anybody who wants to participate can. There are a lot of diverse interpretations and practices with Hellenic polytheism, and it reflects a huge range of historical and cultural influences. So the other thing you will hear it called is Hellenic paganism. So it is basically the exact same thing, but pagans like the word pagan in there. So, I mean, it's basically the same thing. I think the biggest difference here from polytheism to paganism is there's that reverence for the gods, but in paganism, there is an emphasis on piety and living a life aligned with the Hellenic values. So, what does that mean? So, there's a lot more reconstructionists on the pagan end. They want to closely follow the practices of ancient Greece. You have revivalists who are going to draw on all that historical information, but they're going to incorporate some modern interpretations and innovations. And then you have eclectics. We're eclectics. I can tell you that right now. Because what we do is we combine elements of ancient and modern practice. Okay. And then we build our bridges and we go where those bridges take us. We're not going to follow in a straight line. Now, in the paganism, Hellenic community, again, there's no single unified set of beliefs or practices either. There's a wide range of those expressions within this community. Same thing, our practices are going to involve, the offerings, the blessings, the rituals to honor them. There is the Xenia concept, that emphasizes hospitality, that guest host relationship. That's a core value. So like when we do our group ceremonies every month, that is definitely Xenia. We are hosting the muses on that altar. We are, building a bridge through, weaving the offerings and, soliciting them in a happy manner, right? So it is a devotional type of religion. I hate using the word religion, but there it is. Where, we are working a reciprocal relationship with these deities, offering gifts and prayers in exchange for blessings. There's always give and take. Anybody who tells you that doesn't exist is full of shit. Everything in the world and universe operates on a give and take system. Nothing from nothing is nothing, right? So if you want, you have to give. It's a balance of give and take on both ends, us and deity. And again, it's not an ethnic religion. I'm so tired of that bullshit on TikTok too. It's open to anyone who wishes to explore and participate. So it can be influenced also in the paganism aspect of Hellenism. It is influenced by other traditions. So like my eclectic Hellenic practice does have aspects of, I would say, lots of deital, input, like Metatron. Like I have runic, so that's like your acid true, so I do have different influences by different traditions that I work with, but it works well together, whatever works well for you. The one thing though, it's not a syncretic religion. So the different deities aren't considered like the saint, which we see in a lot of religions, where Saint Michael is also the Orisha Oya, who's also Santa Mirta in Guadalajara, like we're not syncretic like that. We keep these ancient deities, these Greek ones, very, very separate. There is no crossover, like you see in most other religions. So again, in a nutshell, boy, I beat this to death too, didn't I? I love that you guys roll with me because like I go on tangents, right? So you don't have to be of Greek descent. There is an emphasis on, ethical behavior, hospitality, moderation. So, I mean, there is this word Neoplatonism that you might hear when you're researching this. That's kind of like a philosophical approach within Hellenism. I don't practice that. I mean, if it's for you, go for it. But I have a hard time with that. But anyways, it is a specific tradition with its own history, deities, and practices. So it is distinct from general paganism or other polytheistic religions. It is a religion and it's not a historical reenactment or a form of performance art. And I put that in there because I think people confuse that with, you know, stage theater magic or whatever. And it's definitely not that. All right. Questions. Now that I've rambled, boy, I'm so sorry. Like I go on tangents. But any questions? Any questions at all? I'm here for it. Was that good information or do I need to review anything?
There's like a lot, but you'll send us the slides so I can like
Yeah,
go back.
I definitely can send it. I know it's always so much. I'm sorry.